A millionaire visited a nursing home to make a donation, but ended up shocked to find his mother, who had been missing for 40 years, and what she told him brought him to tears. Liam O'Connell had everything many only dreamed of. He owned luxury cars, a mansion straight out of a movie, and a bank account that seemed endless, even if he spent money like there was no tomorrow. At his age, he owned one of the country's largest hotel chains. People saw him and thought his life was perfect, but Liam, though he didn't say it, carried an old sadness in his heart, a sadness that came from when he was a child and asked about his mom, and no one knew how to give him a straight answer, or so they told him. Only his Aunt Ruth, who had been like a second mother to him, assured him that his parents had died in an accident and that it was better not to stir those memories. It was a cloudy Friday when Liam decided he wanted to do something different. He didn't want another meeting or another fancy party. He asked his secretary to find a nursing home where they could make a significant donation. Not just any, but one of those that truly needed help. That's how he ended up at 19 Elmwood Street, in an old, peeling-walled nursing home with a musty smell. As soon as he stepped out of his SUV, the facility's director, a short woman with dyed red hair, came out to greet him as if he were a celebrity. The plan was simple. Liam would hand over a checker, pose for a photo for his company's social media, and get out of there as quickly as possible. But as soon as he crossed the main door, something changed. The atmosphere was somber, but there was something more, something that pulled at his soul. He walked down the long corridor, seeing elderly residents sitting on broken armchairs, some asleep, others staring at the TV, not quite understanding what was happening. Then he saw her, sitting in a wheelchair near a dirty window. There was an old woman with disheveled white hair, wrinkled, but with a gaze that sent shivers down his spine. He didn't know why, but he couldn't stop looking at her. It was as if something deep inside him screamed that he knew her. He approached slowly, his hand trembling slightly, which was unusual for him, as he was normally a confident and resolute man. The woman looked up as if she felt someone calling her without words. Liam swallowed hard. She wasn't the neatest or the best dressed. In fact, she seemed one of the most forgotten residents there, but there was something in her face, in the way she tilted her head, that felt unbearably familiar. The nursing home director, seeing his interest, quickly approached to tell him that this woman's name was Clara and that she had been there for many years. She had no registered family, and according to them, she didn't speak much either. Sometimes she uttered single words. Sometimes she just stared into space for hours. Liam asked how she had arrived there, but the director merely shrugged, saying that the older files had been lost in a flood a few years ago. Liam didn't know why, but he felt the need to kneel before Clara. Not for the photo op or to make a good impression. It was something else, something deep within him. When he was in front of her, Clara raised a trembling hand and touched his cheek. Liam froze. She murmured something barely audible, something that sounded to him like his name. It couldn't be, he told himself. It couldn't be. He felt the world spinning around him. The director, nervous, asked if everything was all right. Liam only nodded, but his mind was a mess. Suddenly, the check, the photos, the charity event no longer mattered. The only thing that mattered was the woman in front of him. This woman, who, though he couldn't recall from where or how, he felt had been in his life long before this moment. He pulled out his wallet and, almost without thinking, gave the director a substantial amount of money so that nothing would be lacking that week. But he refused to take photos. He didn't want anyone to use it for social media. In his mind, there was only one idea: to find out who Clara really was. Before leaving, Liam asked the director if he could visit her again. The woman smiled, believing he was just another millionaire with pangs of guilt, wanting to sponsor an elderly person to clear his conscience. Liam didn't bother to correct her. He just asked to be allowed to return whenever he wished. Already in his SUV, with sweaty hands on the steering wheel, Liam felt something he hadn't felt in years: fear. Fear of what they would find if he kept digging. Fear of discovering that his life, that perfect and brilliant life he had built, was not based on truths, but on very old lies. He started the engine, but couldn't stop looking at the nursing home building in the rearview mirror as he drove away. Clara, that woman lost in her own world, was a piece of his history that had somehow returned to find him. And Liam knew he wouldn't be able to rest until he knew the whole truth. Liam couldn't sleep that night. He closed his eyes, and the only thing he saw was Clara's face. He didn't understand what was happening to him. He was a practical man, accustomed to making quick decisions without being swayed by emotions. But now, lying in his enormous bed and staring at the ceiling, he felt a void in his chest that he didn't know how to fill. He got up several times, walked barefoot around the room, went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, but nothing took away that feeling that something was terribly wrong. He grabbed his phone, opened social media to distract himself, but couldn't concentrate. He closed everything and stared at the black screen. It was as if something inside him screamed that Clara was not a stranger, that there was something more, something his mind couldn't grasp, but his heart already knew. The next morning, without a second thought, he got into his SUV and drove to the nursing home. He didn't even call ahead. He arrived, knocked on the door, and the director greeted him with a forced smile, as if she didn't expect to see him again so soon. Liam paid little attention. He just asked if he could see Clara. They found her sitting in the same spot near the window. This time, when Liam approached, Clara lifted her head faster. She stared at him intently, as if somewhere in her mind she also recognized something in him. She said nothing, but her eyes, those large, clear eyes, spoke to him in a way words never could. Liam knelt before her again. He didn't know what to say. He didn't want to scare her. He just smiled and spoke to her in a quiet voice. He asked her how she was, if she remembered anything at all. Clara didn't answer. She just raised her trembling hand and touched his cheek again, just like the day before. That caress, so soft and clumsy, shook his soul. He felt he had experienced that gesture before, when he was very young, but he couldn't remember it clearly. He stayed there for a while in silence, while broken images flickered in his head: a woman's laughter, a sweet perfume, old songs his Aunt Ruth never played for him. Could it be? Could it be that this woman in front of him was his mom? The same mom everyone told him had died so long ago? The director approached, somewhat uncomfortably, to offer to take Clara to the patio, where there was more light and a small garden. Liam accepted. He gently pushed her in her wheelchair, trying to make the movement smooth. They sat under a tree that offered little shade. There, in the open air, Clara seemed to breathe better. Her eyes moved from side to side, as if searching for something. Suddenly, she gripped Liam's hand tightly and mumbled a name. He leaned closer, wanting to hear clearly. "Clara," said Liam. Not complete, not clear, but enough. Liam's heart skipped a beat. No one at the nursing home had told her his name. No one else but his inner circle called him Liam. It was a family nickname, something his Aunt Ruth used, something his oldest friends knew. How was it possible that Clara, that woman lost in her world, knew that name? Liam's head began to fill with questions. What if his aunt had lied to him? What if his mother had never died? What if she had been abandoned here to disappear from his life? He didn't want to believe it. Ruth had cared for him his whole life, raised him, given him affection, but that caress, that look, that name, all of it said something else. He sat beside Clara almost all morning, talking nonsense to her, telling her things about his life as if she could understand everything. Clara didn't say much, but her expression changed. Sometimes she smiled faintly, sometimes she seemed about to cry. It was as if inside she was fighting a flood of memories that wanted to surface, but couldn't. The director came out again after a while, looking displeased, to remind him that visiting hours were about to end. Liam asked for a few more minutes. He couldn't leave. Not yet. He pulled out his phone and, with the director's permission, took a picture of Clara. He wanted to have her face, not just in his memory, but also in his pocket, something he could look at again and again, in case all this was just a misunderstanding, a trick of his mind. As he helped her back to her spot, Clara looked at him intently again. No words were needed. Liam felt that look was like an embrace that spanned 40 years of silence. He knelt one last time and whispered in her ear that he would return, that she was not alone. He left the nursing home with his chest in tatters. The sun hit his face, but he didn't feel it. He walked slowly to his SUV, without thinking, as if on autopilot. He got in and sat there for a long time, with the keys in his hand, but without moving a muscle. He knew he had to do something. He had to know the whole truth, even if it hurt. He couldn't go on living without understanding who this woman was who now occupied every corner of his mind. He closed his eyes and again saw her face. That face he couldn't and wouldn't forget. Liam drove aimlessly. The city blurred past, but he didn't even notice the traffic lights. Everything was on autopilot. His head was trapped in a whirlwind of old memories, new questions, and a rage that was just beginning to grow inside him. He couldn't understand how it was possible that no one had told him the truth for so many years. Truly, his entire life had been based on a lie. He arrived at his penthouse apartment without really remembering how, tossed his keys onto the entrance table, and collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. In his mind, he began to unearth things he had always kept hidden in a dark corner, things he had preferred not to think about. He remembered being a child, sitting in the kitchen while his Aunt Ruth made him pancakes. He remembered asking again and again why he didn't have a mom like the other kids. Ruth always had the same answer, that she and his dad had been in a terrible accident, that they had both died together, and that he was too young to remember them. That story, repeated so many times, had become like a tattoo in his mind. He had never dared to question it. Until now. He got up and went to an old box he kept in his closet. It was a shoebox he had never seriously opened. Inside were photos, drawings from when he was a child, and some letters he had written when he was just learning to form sentences. Rummaging through everything, he found a photo that chilled him to the bone. It was an old, yellowish photo of him as a baby in a woman's arms. The woman had a sweet smile, a simple dress, and long hair that cascaded down. It wasn't Ruth. With trembling hands, he turned the photo over. On the back, written in hurried handwriting, it said, "Clara and Liam, my whole life. Clara." The same name as the woman in the nursing home. It couldn't be a coincidence. He collapsed back onto the couch, the photo clutched in his hands. He felt as if the ground were opening beneath his feet. He had grown up believing his parents were dead, that Ruth was his only family. But that photo told him something else. It told him that his mother had been alive at least long enough to hold him, to love him, to truly be his mom. He also remembered some odd things he had seen as a child. Documents Ruth kept under lock and key, visits from serious men who spoke to her in hushed tones when they thought Liam wasn't listening. One day, he had heard the word inheritance, although at the time he didn't understand what it meant. He only remembered Ruth's face, serious, lips pressed tightly, as she signed papers. Doubt began to poison his soul. What if Ruth wasn't the savior he had always believed? What if she had done terrible things to keep what wasn't hers? The idea pained him deeply, but he couldn't ignore it. Not after seeing that photo, not after feeling the raw connection with Clara. He grabbed his phone and called an old acquaintance, Mark Saunders, a private investigator who had once worked for him on a business matter. He wasn't cheap, but Liam knew Mark was one of those who wouldn't drop a case until he uncovered every last truth. They agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next day. He hung up and sat in silence. Suddenly, his house felt enormous and empty. All the luxury, the expensive paintings, the designer furniture, it all looked false, as if it didn't truly belong to him. He walked to the window and looked out at the city from his penthouse. Out there, life went on as usual, as if his world wasn't falling apart. He closed his eyes and again saw Clara's face. That lost, tired look, but full of something he recognized deep within. He knew there was no turning back. What had started as a charity visit had become a personal mission, a brutal need to know the truth about his past, about who he really was. He pressed his mother's photo against his chest and swore he wouldn't rest until he knew everything. No matter what he had to do, no matter who he had to fight, he was determined. The coffee shop was half empty when Liam arrived. The place smelled of burnt coffee and sweet pastries, but he didn't care. He was too nervous to notice trivialities. He sat at a table by the window and waited, his foot tapping as if he had a motor inside him. Mark Saunders arrived punctually, looking the same as always. A 2-day beard, a worn leather jacket, and that face that suggested he had seen more ugly things than he cared to recount. Liam didn't waste time. He pulled out his mother's photo and placed it on the table, pushing it towards Mark. The detective looked at it, then at Liam, then back at the photo. "What do you need me to find?" he asked in a gruff voice. Liam explained everything, speaking slowly about the visit to the nursing home, about Clara, about the connection he felt, about the doubts eating away at his mind. Mark listened without interrupting, his face serious, as if he were assembling a puzzle in his head. When Liam finished, Mark just said he needed a couple of days to start contacting his sources. They said goodbye quickly. Go. Neither of them was one to linger, filling uncomfortable silences. Liam returned home feeling the clock moving slower than usual. He spent the entire weekend pacing like a caged lion. He didn't want to see anyone. No parties, no business dinners. He didn't even want to turn on the TV. He just wanted to know. Early Monday morning, Mark called him. His voice sounded different, as if he had found something he hadn't expected himself. "We need to meet," he said without giving further details. They met at the same coffee shop. Mark arrived with a manila envelope and a look of bad news. He sat down and pulled out a stack of papers. "I've been going through old archives. The accident where your parents supposedly died did happen. There are official reports, newspaper clippings. All of that is real," he said, sliding copies of the documents across the table. Liam quickly skimmed them, recognizing his father's and mother's names in the reports, the overturned car, the highway collision. Everything was documented, but something caught his attention. The medical report stated that the woman survived the accident, though with severe injuries and mental confusion. Mental confusion? Liam asked, feeling his heart pound. Mark nodded. Yes. Apparently, after the accident, your mother was taken to a rural hospital. She was there for a few weeks before disappearing from the system. Liam felt his hands tremble. And no one asked about her? Officially, no. The records show that a woman came to claim her, claiming to be her only family. She took her from the hospital and admitted her to a nursing home, the same one where you found her. Liam closed his eyes, trying not to lose control. Everything pointed to Ruth. Everything. The name of that woman? He asked, his voice hard. Mark sifted through the papers and pulled out an old yellowed form. Here it is. Name of the person who picked up the patient, Ruth O'Connell. It was like a punch to the stomach. Liam gripped the paper tightly. It was enough proof to know that his aunt had not only lied to him his entire life, but had hidden his mother as if she were an old piece of furniture that was no longer useful. That's not all, Mark said, scratching his head. The hospital registered something else. When your mother woke from the coma, she remembered almost nothing. Not her full name, not her address, not her family. The only thing she kept saying was Liam. Liam felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he blinked them away quickly so they wouldn't be noticed. Liam? Just like that? Yes. The doctors thought she was delirious. They never knew she was talking about you. Liam looked at his mother's photo, the one he had carried with him all weekend. Now he understood everything. That gesture in the nursing home, that way of touching his face, that murmur. They weren't delusions. It was her trying to find him amidst the fog of her broken mind. He rubbed his face with his hands. He had a lump in his throat he didn't know how to dislodge. What are you going to do? Mark asked, looking at him curiously. Liam didn't answer immediately. He carefully put the papers back into the envelope, as if they were pieces of his life he was only just beginning to assemble. He knew the next step was to get answers, but it wouldn't be easy. Ruth was an intelligent, cunning woman, and would surely do everything possible to keep covering up what she had done. He got up from the table, threw some bills onto the plate, and left the coffee shop without another word. He had only one objective in mind, to confront Ruth, and he wouldn't stop until she told him the whole absolute truth. Liam didn't go straight to Ruth's house. Something in his instinct told him he shouldn't just show up and ask her directly without more proof. If he had learned anything in all those years of business, it was that you don't fight a war without first knowing your enemy. And at this moment, however painful it was to think, his enemy was his own aunt. He went first to his old house, the house where he grew up. It was now empty. He had kept it purely out of sentiment, although he hadn't truly set foot in it for years. He had keys to everything, so he entered without problems. The smell of dust filled his nose. He walked through the silent hallways, remembering when he used to run around with torn pants and scraped knees. Everything seemed smaller, sadder. He headed to Ruth's study. It was a small room she used as an office. She had always been very possessive of that space. As a child, Liam couldn't enter without permission. Now, as an adult, he didn't need anyone's permission. He began to search through the drawers. Old papers, paid bills, expired insurance contracts. Nothing unusual at first glance, but something wasn't right. He remembered that as a child, he had seen Ruth keep important documents in a secret compartment in the bookcase. He approached, ran his hands over the furniture, feeling around. It didn't take him long to find a small button hidden in one of the corners. When he pressed it, a false panel opened, revealing a built-in safe. Liam let out a bitter laugh. Of course, Ruth would have a safe. She had always been suspicious even of her own shadow. The problem was, he didn't know the combination. He sat in front of the safe, thinking. He tried Ruth's birth date, then his own. Nothing. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried a date he couldn't forget, the date of his parents' accident. The click of the mechanism unlocking was like thunder in the silent house. He opened the safe with trembling hands. Inside were stacks of old bills, a couple of pieces of jewelry, and several stacked manila envelopes. He pulled everything out and placed it on the desk. He began to examine the envelopes one by one. Most were property deeds, investments, normal paperwork for someone managing money, until he found a more wrinkled one, with moisture stains, simply marked personal. As he opened it, he felt the world collapse around him. There was a copy of his mother's death certificate, but something wasn't right. The date didn't match the records Mark had found. It was a date before the accident. According to that paper, his mother had died a year before the highway crash. Liam frowned. He knew it was impossible. That certificate was fake. Next to that document was a legal power of attorney, signed before a notary, where Ruth appeared as the sole guardian and administrator of all the O'Connell family assets, claiming there were no other living heirs. There were also old bank statements showing transfers of large sums of money made shortly after the accident. Everything legally backed, but under the assumption that both his parents had died without leaving any other family. Liam felt rage. Intense rage. Ruth had planned everything. She had taken advantage of the accident, his mother's memory loss, and her own position as a protective aunt to take everything that wasn't hers. Not just money, not just properties. She had stolen his life. She had stolen the possibility of growing up with his real mother. Among the papers, he found an old letter. It was from his mother. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular. It seemed more like a letter of catharsis. In the letter, Clara spoke of her fear. She said she had had a bad feeling before the trip, that Ruth had changed a lot in recent months, that she wasn't the same, that she had begun to distrust her, but she didn't know how to confront her without proof. Liam squeezed the paper in his fingers. It was like hearing his mother's voice from the past, warning him of what was happening. He put everything back into the envelope and into his backpack. He closed the safe, rearranged the panel as it was, and left the study without a sound, though there was no one to hear him. As he got into his SUV, he felt his blood boiling. It was a cold, calculated fury. He wasn't going to make an impulsive scene. He wasn't going to yell or cry in front of Ruth. He was going to use those papers as a weapon. He was going to force her to tell him the truth, the whole truth. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face was hard, his gaze sharp. He was no longer the Liam who had arrived at that nursing home, just wanting to do a good deed. He was a man at war. He started the engine and drove straight to Ruth's house. It was time to confront her face to face. Ruth lived in a large house in an upscale neighborhood, surrounded by well-maintained gardens and tall trees. Liam parked his SUV directly in front of the main door. He turned off the engine. He sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tightly, as if he needed to gather all his energy not to explode right there. Then he exhaled sharply, grabbed the manila envelope from the passenger seat, and got out. He rang the doorbell. Waited. Nothing. He rang again, this time harder. He heard footsteps approaching, and then the door opened. Ruth appeared, impeccable as always, in her fabric dress, her pearl necklace, and that kind expression she had always used to manage him since he was a child. "Liam, what a surprise," she said, smiling. "What are you doing here so early?" Liam didn't smile. He said nothing, just held up the envelope in his hand. "We need to talk," he blurted out, his voice dry. Ruth frowned for a second, but then stepped aside to let him in. Liam entered, and the smell of incense filled his nose. The house was orderly, clean as always, but now all that order seemed false, just like her. They sat in the living room, facing each other. He wasted no time, pulled out the copy of the fake death certificate, and placed it on the table. "What is this, Ruth?" he asked, looking her directly in the eyes. She lowered her gaze for barely a second, just a second. Then she looked back at him with the same smile she had always used to calm him. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said in a calm voice. Liam let out a short, bitter laugh. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You signed papers. You made everyone believe my mom was dead when it wasn't true." Ruth slowly crossed her legs as if she were in no hurry, as if she had everything under control. "Liam, my dear, you were a baby. You don't know everything that happened then. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of pain. I did my best to protect you." Liam clenched his fists. "Protect me? Putting my mom in a forgotten nursing home and keeping all the family money was protecting me?" For the first time, Ruth's smile wavered slightly. Not much, but enough for Liam to notice. "It was for your own good," she said, almost in a whisper, but firmly. "Your mom wasn't well. She didn't remember anything. She was a danger to you, to everyone." Liam leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "And you decided the best thing was to make her disappear, to keep her locked up like an old piece of furniture and live off money that wasn't yours." Ruth clicked her tongue, annoyed. "It wasn't like that. I raised you. I gave you everything you needed. Don't judge me now that you're a man. You don't know the decisions one has to make to survive." Liam shook his head, feeling his blood boil. "It wasn't your decision. You had no right." Ruth stared at him intently. For a second, she dropped the mask. Her expression hardened. It became cold. "You're right. she said in a dry voice. I had no right, but I did it because if I didn't, that woman would have dragged you into her madness. And everything we built, all the fortune, all the life you have now, wouldn't exist. Liam recoiled, feeling as if he had been slapped. We built? He repeated. You built. I was just a child. Ruth smiled again, but this time there was venom in her smile. I was the one who kept everything afloat while you grew up like a prince. You don't just owe me your upbringing. You owe me your success, your place in the world. Liam stood up abruptly. He couldn't listen to her anymore. What you gave me doesn't justify what you took from me, he said, his voice broken with rage. Ruth also stood up, straightening her dress. And what are you going to do, Liam? Are you going to destroy the only family you have left for a deranged old woman who doesn't even recognize you? Liam looked at her with immense sadness. It wasn't just anger, it was disappointment. It was like realizing that all the admiration, all the affection he had felt for her, was just another lie. I'm not alone, he said, walking towards the door. She is my real family, and I'm going to do everything necessary to give her back her life. Ruth didn't answer. She stood in the middle of the living room, watching him leave with a face hard as stone. Liam slammed the door shut as he exited. He walked to his SUV, feeling that he had crossed a point of no return. Nothing would ever be the same, but he didn't care. It was time to reclaim what had been stolen from him. Liam drove for a long time, aimlessly, just to clear his head a bit, but the rage didn't subside. He felt fire in his chest. Everything he had built in his mind about his family, everything he had believed his whole life, was crumbling. And the worst part was that he knew there was still much to uncover. He parked the SUV on a quiet street and called Mark Saunders. He didn't want to wait any longer. He needed answers, evidence, everything he could use against Ruth to clear his mom's name and, incidentally, recover some of everything she had lost. Mark answered quickly, as if he too had been waiting for his call. What do you have? Liam asked directly. Better come to the office. I can't tell you everything over the phone, the detective said. Liam started the engine, and in less than half an hour, he was parking in front of the small building where Mark had his office. It was a simple place, one of those where the desks are old, the lamps flicker, and the chairs creak. Mark greeted him with a cup of coffee in hand and a face that looked like he hadn't slept well in days. Come in, he said, gesturing. Liam entered, sat down, and placed the manila envelope on the desk, as if it were a shield. Mark sat opposite him, pulled a thick folder from his drawer, and placed it on the table. I've been digging deeper into the accident papers, but also into your aunt's financial movements. It wasn't easy. Ruth is smart and knows how to cover her tracks, but she's not perfect. Liam stared at him intently, like a hawk waiting to strike. I found something big, Mark said, opening the folder. Shortly after the accident, Ruth moved several properties into her name. Some sales were clean, but others not so much. Liam grabbed the papers and began to read. There were copies of deeds, account transfers, sales of land, and houses that were originally his father's property. How could she do it? Liam asked, his voice tight. With falsified documents, Mark explained. She made your mother appear deceased and you as a minor with no direct inheritance, so she became the sole legal heir. Liam felt each word like a punch to the stomach. But that's not all, Mark said, pulling out another sheet. It was a report from an investigator working in another province. The report stated that there were witnesses who remembered Ruth visiting the hospital after the accident, insisting on taking Clara, signing papers, and giving false information. A retired nurse from the hospital recalled that Clara didn't want to leave with her. She was confused, but every time she saw Ruth, she became nervous, restless, as if she sensed that something wasn't right. Liam gritted his teeth. He imagined his mother alone, injured, confused, and forced to leave with someone who only sought to make her disappear. And the nursing home? He asked, wanting to know everything. Mark nodded. The nursing home where your mother was admitted was very low quality. They chose it on purpose. A cheap place where no one would ask too many questions. The director at that time died years ago, but I managed to find a former nurse who worked there. She says she remembers a young woman bringing in an injured older woman, claiming she was a distant aunt. She paid several months in advance, left a fake number, and disappeared. Liam closed his eyes, feeling the anger tighten his chest like a claw. Can the nurse testify? He asked. Mark shrugged. She says yes. She holds no grudge. But she doesn't want trouble either. Although if we pay her for her time and assure her protection, she might testify to what she knows. Liam got up from the chair, pacing back and forth in the office. He was thinking fast, like when he was closing an important deal. We need more, he said. Something that will take her down for good, not just words. We need solid proof. Mark smirked. That's why I called you. I found something else. He pulled out a copy of an old bank statement. After your mother was admitted, Ruth moved a bank account that was in your parents' name. She closed it and transferred the money to an account of hers in the Cayman Islands, all through a lawyer who, curiously, now works for her as a legal advisor. Liam looked at him intently. Do you have the lawyer's name? Mark nodded. His name is Edward Davies, and believe me, that guy is worse than a shark. Liam knew he had to act fast. If Ruth suspected they were closing in, she could destroy evidence, move money, close all doors. Can you keep investigating? Liam asked. Of course, Mark replied. But we'll need more people. This isn't a simple job anymore. We're up against someone who has lived her entire life knowing how to pull strings without getting caught. Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out his card. Do whatever you have to do, he said. But bring me everything, every last stone she's hiding. Mark took the card, put it in his jacket, and extended his hand. All right, but be prepared. This is just the beginning. Liam shook his hand firmly. He knew there was no turning back. Liam was not one to back down when things got tough. In fact, that's when he became strongest. That same night, after seeing everything Mark had shown him, he decided he couldn't keep waiting for everything to resolve itself. It wasn't his style. He returned to his apartment, but not to rest. He locked himself in his study, closed the door, turned off his cell phone so no one would bother him, and pulled out all the papers he had gathered so far. He spread them out on the large wooden table like a puzzle. The fake certificate, the transfers, the property deeds, everything. Each sheet was a dirty piece of the history Ruth had written at her whim. Beside all that, he placed the folder he had always kept in his personal safe. It was a package his father had left with his lawyer, with instructions to deliver it to Liam when he turned 30. He had received it on time, of course, but at the time, he hadn't given it much importance. He had been busy growing his businesses and had left the papers filed away without thoroughly reviewing them. Now, knowing what he knew, those papers could hold answers he never imagined. He opened the folder carefully. The first thing he found was a handwritten letter from his father. Liam, if you are reading this, it's because you are now a full-grown man. I trust you will know how to take care of everything we built with so much effort. Always remember where you come from. Liam felt a lump in his throat, but he kept reading. In the folder were copies of all the family assets, hotels, land, bank accounts. They were in his father's name, some co-owned with his mother. There was also a will. In the will, his father left everything to his wife, Clara, first, and if anything happened to her, it would pass directly to his son, Liam. It said nothing of Ruth, not a word. Liam gritted his teeth. There it was. Firm proof that Ruth had no right to anything. Everything she had managed all those years was not hers. It was his mother's first, and then his. He continued reviewing and found something else. A typewritten letter, signed by a trusted family lawyer, confirming that in the event both Liam's father and mother died, a trust should be opened in Liam's name to protect the inheritance until he reached legal age. But that trust had never been opened. Ruth had done everything to prevent it. Falsifying documents, manipulating lawyers, posing as the only living relative, all to keep the fortune. Liam felt his blood boil in his veins. He leaned back in his chair, breathing deeply, controlling the urge to go at that moment to knock on Ruth's door and scream in her face everything he had discovered, but he knew he had to be smart. If he wanted to reclaim what was his and get justice for his mom, he had to do it right, step by step, with solid evidence, with the law on his side. So he picked up the phone and called Mark. I need you to get a lawyer, he said, as soon as he heard Mark's voice. A good one of those who knows how to fight dirty if necessary. Mark didn't ask for details. Leave it to me, he replied, and hung up. Liam spent the rest of the night organizing everything. He made copies of each document, separated everything into folders, put together a file as if he were going to present the case to a judge, because he knew that was exactly what he was going to do. At dawn, he had everything ready. He showered, put on a dark, simple suit, and left his apartment directly for a notary's office. He needed to certify the documents, to ensure that everything he had could be used legally in his counterattack. As the notary reviewed the papers, Liam looked out the window. The city was beginning to stir. People came and went, oblivious to everything happening in his world. He thought of his mother, of everything she had lost, not just her comfortable life, her home, her family. She had also lost the opportunity to see her son grow up, to hug him on his birthdays, to be there for his triumphs, and his defeats. He thought of everything Ruth had stolen from him, not just money, but an entire life, and he knew he wouldn't stop until he got justice. Several hours passed with paperwork and signatures. When he finished, he received a message from Mark. He had found the perfect lawyer, a young but cunning guy specializing in inheritance disputes and family fraud. Liam smiled for the first time in days. Finally, the pieces were starting to move in his favor. He knew the next step was to confront not only Ruth, but also her world of influence, dirty lawyers, and legal traps. But he didn't care. He was ready. Liam arrived punctually at the meeting Mark had arranged. It was a law office in a tall downtown tower, all glass and steel, where the air smelled of expensive coffee and success. He went up to the 20th floor, and as soon as he entered, he saw Mark waiting for him at reception. He said nothing, just gestured for him to follow. The lawyer's name was Ryan Thompson, 35 years old, impeccable suits, and a gaze that seemed to read people in seconds. When Liam entered his office, Ryan stood up, shook his hand firmly, and invited him to sit down. "Mark briefed me a bit on the matter," Ryan said as he pulled out a notebook. "You have the documents." Liam nodded and placed everything on the table. The deeds, the will, the notarial powers, the fake certificates, all in order. Ryan reviewed each paper patiently, making small notes. He didn't speak much, only occasionally frowning or nodding as if everything he was reading confirmed what he suspected. After almost an hour of silence, he looked up. "Your aunt committed fraud, and not a small one. Falsification of documents, identity usurpation, fraudulent administration of another's estate. If this is presented in court, she could go to jail for many years." Liam clenched his fists but forced himself to remain calm. "What do I need to do?" "First, we need more live evidence," Ryan said. "Witnesses, people who can confirm that your mother was alive when your aunt made her disappear, and that you can prove all the money, all the properties, were moved under false pretenses." Mark interjected. "I've already located a nurse from the nursing home and also a hospital worker who attended Clara after the accident. Both remember important details. If we can get them to testify, we're halfway there." Liam nodded decisively. "Bring them." Ryan gestured with his head. "And one more thing, we need to find original documents, not just copies. That strengthens your case. The original deeds, the bank account certificates, everything you can get." Liam thought quickly. He remembered that in his father's old study, which had been closed since he was a child, there might be more documents stored. The property was still in the family's name, and although he hadn't wanted to go back there since the accident, now he had no choice. He stood up from the chair. "I'll go look for them." Mark offered to accompany him, but Liam refused. "I have to do this alone." He left the office and drove directly to the old homestead, where he had grown up as a child, a few hours from the city. Along the way, his head was spinning. He thought of his mother, his childhood, the lies he had swallowed his whole life without knowing it. When he arrived, the Cedars homestead was just as he remembered. The rusty gate, the dirt road full of stones, the large house with peeling paint. He opened the main door, which creaked as if complaining about the abandonment. He walked straight to his father's study. It was locked, but the old wood didn't resist much when he pushed hard. Inside, everything was covered in dust. The furniture, the paintings, the shelves full of books. The air smelled of dampness and dead memories. He began to search, opened drawers, checked under furniture, removed paintings from the wall, until he found an old safe embedded in the floor under an old rug, another combination. He closed his eyes and thought, what key would his dad use? He tried his birth date, nothing. He tried his parents' anniversary date, nothing. He sat on the floor, frustrated, until he remembered something, a conversation from when he was a child. His dad had told him his favorite number was the day his mom was born, April 7th, 0704. He dialed the combination. The safe clicked and opened. Inside, he found several sealed envelopes, original documents of land deeds, hotel property titles, bank account contracts, all in his father's and mother's names. But what caught his attention most was a separate envelope with his name written on the cover. For Liam, when the time is right. He opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter. Liam, if you ever doubt who you are or where you come from, here you will find your truth. Your mother and I love you more than anything in the world. If you are reading this, something has probably happened to us. Don't trust anyone blindly, son. Even family can fail you. Trust your heart, Dad. Liam felt his chest tighten. He put all the documents in his backpack, closed the safe again, and left the study without a sound. He knew that now he had everything necessary to prove that Ruth had built her life on a mountain of lies, But he also knew that the most difficult step remained, getting his mother out of the nursing home and helping her reclaim, even if only a piece, of the life that had been stolen from her. Liam wasted no time. As soon as he returned to the city, he met with Ryan and Mark. He handed them all the original documents he had found at the homestead. The emotion barely contained him, but he also felt that tension in his chest, as if something told him that the worst was yet to come. Ryan reviewed each paper with his usual calm that sometimes caused impatience, and finished assembling the file. They now had everything: witnesses, original documents, bank account records, his father's true will, and even the personal letter. "We are ready," Ryan said, closing the folder firmly. Liam nodded. It was time to pressure Ruth. They summoned her to Ryan's office. It wasn't easy. Ruth didn't respond immediately to calls or emails. She disappeared for a few days, but Mark, who was a bloodhound at finding people, managed to locate her. Someone saw her leaving a luxury spa and then entering a house in another exclusive neighborhood that Liam didn't even know she owned. The pressure worked. Ruth agreed to meet, but she set conditions. She didn't want cameras or recordings, just a civilized talk, as she herself put it. Liam arrived first at the office, accompanied by Ryan and Mark. He didn't want to make any mistakes this time. When Ruth entered, she was impeccable. A pearl-colored pantsuit, perfect makeup, and that smile of hers, the one she used when she wanted to manipulate everyone. But in her eyes, there was something different. Not fear, but anger, wounded pride. "Liam," she said as soon as she sat across from him, "how sad that you've come to this after everything I did for you." Liam didn't fall for the provocation. Ryan placed the folder on the table and opened it slowly. "Mrs. O'Connell," the lawyer said in a firm voice, "we are here because we have clear evidence that you committed fraud, falsified documents, and dispossessed Mrs. Clara O'Connell, Liam's legitimate mother, of her assets and her freedom." Ruth let out a dry laugh. "Evidence? Please, those are just old papers. Nothing a good lawyer can't explain in court." Liam looked at her, feeling a mix of sadness and rage. "I don't want to take this to trial," he said, trying to sound as calm as possible. "I just want you to return what isn't yours. I want to clear my mom's name. I want you to face what you did." Ruth looked at him with contempt. "Do you really think you're going to destroy me so easily after all the power I've built up all these years?" "No, my dear Liam. It's not that simple." Ryan slid some copies of the bank transfers towards her. "This is money laundering, madam. Transfers to tax havens. Enough for the CRA and the Crown Prosecution Service to start investigating you." Ruth skimmed the papers without flinching. "You have nothing firm. A letter? An old will. Witnesses who barely remember. You don't scare me." Liam took a deep breath. "And what about the fact that my mother is alive? That she can recognize you? That she mutters my name every time she sees me?" For an instant, just an instant, he saw a tremor in Ruth's lips, the first crack in her steel facade, but she recovered quickly. "Your mother is deranged. Do you think her testimony is worth anything? No one will believe a poor old woman who can't even remember her own last name." Mark smirked, an almost amused expression. "She doesn't need to remember everything. We have medical records proving that after the accident she was alive, conscious, and that you admitted her to a forgotten nursing home without being her legal guardian." Ruth clenched her jaw. She was no longer the calm woman who had entered the office. Now she was a cornered beast. "And what do you want, Liam?" She spat the words, her eyes shining with fury. "Do you want to humiliate me? Send me to jail? Ruin me publicly?" Liam didn't hesitate. "I want justice. I want my mother to recover what is hers. I want all of Canada to know who you really are." Ruth stood up from the chair so abruptly that she almost knocked it over. "You don't know who you're messing with," she said, her voice lowering threateningly. "You don't know the power I have. I'm not going to sit idly by." Ryan adjusted his glasses without losing his composure. "It's too late for threats, madam. You have two options. Reach an agreement right now or face criminal prosecution that you won't be able to control." Ruth looked at him as if she wanted to kill him with her gaze. Then she turned to Liam. "You are making the biggest mistake of your life, Liam." He held her gaze without fear. "I already made the mistake of trusting you. I don't intend to repeat it." Ruth grabbed her purse, swiped at the folder of documents on the table, and stormed out of the office without saying goodbye. The slamming door echoed in the office like thunder. Liam collapsed into the chair, feeling the weight of years of lies suddenly fall upon him. Ryan looked at him seriously. "She's going to defend herself with everything," he said. "Prepare for a dirty war." Liam nodded, clenching his fists. He was ready for anything. Liam didn't want to wait any longer. After the confrontation with Ruth, He understood that the most important piece of all this was Clara. She, though fragile, was the living proof of everything that had happened, and he was not going to continue allowing her to be in that forgotten nursing home amidst abandonment. That same afternoon, he went straight to the place. He didn't call ahead, didn't make an appointment. He arrived, got out of his SUV, and pushed open the rusty gate with a single shove. The director, the same dyed-haired woman who had greeted him the first time, ran to intercept him. "Mr. O'Connell," she said, "I told you, visits must be scheduled." Liam didn't let her finish. "I didn't come to visit," he said, looking her directly in the eye. "I came to take my mother home." The director opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She only managed to follow him as he walked determinedly down the long, damp corridor. He found Clara in her usual spot, sitting by the dirty window, staring into space. But this time something was different. When Liam approached, Clara blinked several times, as if recognizing his presence, as if something within her was slowly activating. He knelt in front of her and took her hands. "Mom," he said for the first time, using the word without fear. "You are not alone anymore. I will take care of everything. You are coming home with me." Clara looked at him. Her lips trembled. She didn't speak clear words, but her eyes filled with tears. Liam felt his heart break into 1,000 pieces. He didn't ask permission. He called a private doctor he had already hired, and in less than an hour, Clara was being transferred to a private clinic. A clean, modern, light-filled place, with doctors who genuinely cared about their patients. A new stage began there. The doctors performed studies, analyses, neurological exams. The diagnosis: moderate cognitive damage from the accident and years of neglect, but with the possibility of partial recovery if given the right treatment. Stimulation therapies, medication, constant care. Liam didn't hesitate for a second. He accepted everything. He didn't care about the money. If there was even a minimal chance that his mother could recover some of her life, he was going to fight for it. Difficult days passed. There were times when Clara remembered nothing. Times when she got scared. Times when she got lost in her own world. Liam didn't leave her side. He accompanied her to all therapies, read books to her, spoke to her as if she could understand every word, as if Clara's mind only needed a little push to reconnect. One day, while they were in the clinic's garden, Clara gripped his hand tightly. "Liam," she murmured, barely audible. Liam knelt quickly without letting go. "I'm here, Mom. Don't worry, everything will be all right." Clara looked at him, and in her gaze was something he hadn't seen in weeks. It was as if finally, after so long, a part of her had woken up. "My boy," she said, her voice broken but clear. Liam felt such a large lump in his throat that he could barely breathe. He hugged her tightly, with a desperate tenderness, as if trying to protect her from lost time, from pain, from all the years they couldn't be together. Clara cried, and her tears fell silently on the gray sweater they had given her at the clinic. That was the first big step. The doctors were surprised. They said it was a huge breakthrough, that she was starting to recognize faces, trying to form words, showing strong emotions. Liam didn't leave her side. He brought her photos from his childhood, songs his mother used to sing to him as a baby, soft perfume scents that he thought might help awaken memories. Slowly, Clara improved. It wasn't like pressing a button and fixing everything, but every small advance was a victory, a shy smile, a stray word, a direct gaze. One afternoon, while they were sitting in the garden, Clara took his hand again. "My house?" she asked, her voice trembling. Liam looked at her in surprise. "Do you want to go home, Mum?" he asked, emotional. Clara nodded with difficulty. Liam felt like crying again, but held back. He caressed her hand and promised her that very soon they would have a home together again. Not in that old house where so many lies had been woven, but in a new, clean place, full of truth. That day he understood that even if his mother didn't remember everything, her heart knew where she belonged. The next step was to get her out of the clinic, settle her in a decent home, and continue fighting for her recovery. But he also knew he couldn't let his guard down. Ruth was still free, and if anything, she had shown that she wouldn't give up so easily. Liam looked at his mother, so fragile, yet so brave, and gritted his teeth. The war was just beginning. It was Sunday, and the weather was strange. One of those days when the sky couldn't decide whether to rain or clear up. Liam had taken Clara to the clinic patio, as he did almost every day. It was their routine, to get her some sun, talk to her, try to elicit a gesture, a few more words. He wasn't in a hurry. He had all the patience in the world for her. They were sitting under a tree with a blanket over Clara's legs because the air was a bit chilly. Liam spoke softly to her, telling her about the plants, about the cars passing in the distance. Sometimes she responded with a faint smile. Sometimes she just stared. That day, as he showed her a photo of himself as a child riding a toy horse, Clara frowned as if something inside her stirred. Liam watched her closely. "Do you remember this, Mom?" he asked, bringing the photo closer. Clara raised her trembling hand, barely touching it with her fingertips, as if it was something sacred. She murmured something Liam didn't quite understand. He leaned closer to hear better. "What did you say?" Clara whispered, almost a sigh. "The palms," she said. Liam froze. "What?" "The palms." She nodded very slowly, as if the simple act of remembering cost her effort. "The Cedars homestead," she repeated a little more clearly. Liam felt a shiver run down his spine. That name didn't ring a bell in his current life, but it was clear that for Clara, it meant something important. It wasn't a random name. It was like a spark in her mind. He quickly pulled out his phone and searched the Cedars homestead online. Several options appeared, but one caught his attention. An old estate on the outskirts of the province, abandoned, registered as property of the O'Connell family many years ago. His father had bought that homestead before the accident, when they dreamed of having a vacation spot away from the city. Liam had never been there as a child. His Aunt Ruth always said that place was dangerous, that it was too far away, that it wasn't worth it. Now he understood why they never took him there. He looked at Clara again. She was looking at him too, with that expression of mixed sadness and hope. "Do you want us to go there?" he asked, caressing her hand. Clara nodded. It wasn't a big movement, but it was clear. Liam felt his heart beating so hard that his ears were ringing. He knew he couldn't take her there at that moment. She was too fragile. She needed constant medical care. But he could go. He promised her softly that he would go, that he would find everything necessary to understand what had happened. He stayed a little longer with her, talking, reassuring her. When Clara fell asleep, peaceful under the tree, Liam knew he couldn't waste time. That same afternoon, he met with Mark. He explained everything: Clara's memory, the name of the homestead, the connection to his past. Mark lit up just like him. "If she remembered that, it's because something important happened there," the detective said, adjusting his worn cap. Liam nodded. "We have to go." Mark didn't hesitate for a second. "First thing tomorrow." That night, Liam could barely sleep. He spent it going over everything he knew, connecting the dots in his head. What was at that homestead? Why did Clara, even lost in her broken memories, remember that place? What secrets were hidden there that Ruth wanted to bury forever? At dawn, he met Mark at a mechanic's garage. The detective had found an old, all-terrain truck because they knew that to reach the homestead, they would have to travel difficult roads. "Ready to go to the end of the world?" Mark joked, but his smile was serious. Liam smiled too, but not out of amusement. Ready for anything. They set off. During the journey, the landscape changed. From paved streets, they went to gravel roads, then to dirt tracks surrounded by dry brush. The heat grew stronger. Dust blew in through the windows, and every bump shook them as if the truck was going to fall apart. But they didn't stop. After almost 4 hours of travel, they finally saw it. The homestead. In the middle of nowhere, the old structure stood. It was an enormous building of gray stone walls, covered in vines and weeds. It looked like a ghost from another era. Liam got out of the truck, looking at everything with a knot in his stomach. He knew he was about to discover something big, something that could change everything. The truck stopped abruptly in front of an old, rotten wooden gate, barely hanging from a rusty hinge. Liam got out first. The air smelled of dry earth, old dampness, abandonment. The homestead was there, enormous, silent, almost daring them to enter. Mark pulled a flashlight from his backpack, even though it was still daytime. He didn't trust old places, and neither did Liam. Something in the atmosphere felt heavy, as if the walls themselves guarded secrets that didn't want to be discovered. They carefully pushed the gate. It shrieked so loudly that even the birds flew from nearby trees. They slowly advanced through a weed-choked courtyard. The ground was cracked with muddy puddles and loose stones. Every step kicked up dust. They reached the house's main door. It was large, solid wood, though half falling apart. Liam pushed hard, and the door swung open, releasing a cloud of dust that made them cough. Inside, the atmosphere was even denser. The high ceiling let in rays of light that filtered through broken beams. There were old furniture covered with dirty sheets, crooked paintings on the walls, and broken glass shards everywhere. "Are you sure you want to continue?" Mark asked, looking around distrustfully. Liam nodded without hesitation. "There's something here. I feel it." They began to explore the place. First, they passed through a spacious living room, then a long dining room with a table that still had broken plates on it, as if someone had rushed out in the middle of dinner and never returned. They reached what looked like a library. Books strewn on the floor, old papers scattered. Liam walked slowly, paying attention to every detail. Suddenly, Mark called him from a corner. "Look at this." Liam approached. Mark had found a trapdoor in the floor, half hidden under an old rug. They looked at each other without speaking. Liam grabbed the edge of the trapdoor and pulled hard. The wood groaned, but it gave way. Beneath, stairs descended into a dark basement. Liam swallowed hard. "Let's go." They turned on their flashlights and descended slowly. The air was icy and smelled of damp earth. The stairs creaked as if they were about to break. Downstairs, the basement was large, full of dusty boxes, rotting shelves, and furniture covered with torn plastic sheets. Liam walked straight to one of the largest boxes, opened it, and inside found old papers, photo albums, documents. He began to look through photos of his father when he was young, his mother smiling at a party, himself as a baby all forgotten there, as if someone had wanted to erase those memories forever. But there was something else. At the bottom of the box, he found a blue folder sealed with yellow tape. He tore it open and pulled out the papers. It was a record, a medical report for his mother, dated days after the accident, and in it, a handwritten note. Patient transferred, at the request of family member Ruth O'Connell. No diagnosis of permanent disability, only partial memory loss. Psychological treatment recommended, not institutionalization. Liam felt his chest tighten. His mother hadn't been deranged. She had only lost part of her memory. And Ruth, knowing that, decided to lock her in a nursing home forever. "Here it is," Liam murmured, showing Mark the document. The detective read it in silence. Then he clicked his tongue in fury. "With this, Ruth can't get away." Liam put the folder in his backpack, but something else caught his attention. In a corner of the basement, almost hidden among broken furniture, there was a small door, one of those that seemed made for storing tools. He approached, opened it slowly. The flashlight illuminated a tiny, almost empty space, except for something on the floor. A car, or what was left of one. It was a rusted chassis, crushed by the years, covered in dust and cobwebs. But Liam immediately recognized the shape, the color, the emblem. It was his parents' car. Mark approached, impressed. "What the hell is this doing here?" Liam couldn't believe it. All this time, they had been told the car had been destroyed in the accident, that it was irreparable, that it had been sent to a junkyard. But no, here it was, hidden in the homestead's basement. He got closer and saw something that chilled him. The passenger seat was intact, and there, on the floor, half covered in dirt, he found a silver pendant, a small heart engraved with the initials C and J, Clara and James, his parents. He squeezed the pendant in his hand. "Something happened here," he said softly. "Something Ruth wanted to hide." Mark nodded. "And she can't hide it anymore." Liam put the pendant in his pocket, closed his backpack with the papers and the medical report, and looked one last time at the abandoned car. He knew he had found a key piece, but he also knew that this only made Ruth more dangerous. She wasn't going down without a fight, and neither was he. When Liam and Mark left the homestead, the sun was already setting. The sky was a mix of orange and purple, and the wind kicked up clouds of dust as they walked. They got into the truck in silence, each lost in thought. It didn't need to be said. What they had found was big, so big it could put Ruth on the ropes once and for all. But Mark, always thinking one step ahead, wasn't satisfied. "We're missing something," he said as he started the engine. "Proof, yes, but we also need a witness, someone who can confirm what happened at this homestead." Liam looked at him sideways, understanding instantly. "Do you think anyone saw anything?" Mark let out a dry laugh. "In small towns, everything is known. There's always someone who saw, who heard, who remembers something. We just have to find them." They wasted no time. They drove down to the nearest village, about 15 minutes from the homestead. It was a small place, with cobblestone streets, low-roofed houses, and people who looked at you strangely if you weren't from there. They parked in front of a small grocery store that was barely standing. Mark, who was an expert at dealing with all kinds of people, was the first to enter. Liam followed him. Inside, an elderly woman tended behind the counter. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her hands were full of wrinkles and hard work. When she saw them, she narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Mark greeted with a smile. "We're from the O'Connell family. We're looking for someone who worked at the Cedars homestead many years ago." The woman stared at them fixedly, weighing them up. "Why do you want to know?" she asked in a dry voice. Liam stepped forward. "It's important, ma'am. We want to know what really happened there. My mom went through something very difficult, and we believe someone can help us." The woman was silent for a few seconds, then adjusted her apron and came out from behind the counter. "Come," she simply said. She led them to the back of the store, where there was a small sitting area with old photos on the walls. She pointed to one in particular, a group of smiling men in front of the homestead. "My husband worked there," she said. "His name was Robert. He was a foreman for many years until everything closed down overnight." Liam felt his heart beat faster. "He's still alive?" The woman nodded. "He's alive, but he's ill. He barely leaves his bed. If you want to see him, it's at your own risk. He doesn't like to talk much." Liam didn't hesitate. "We want to see him." The woman directed them to a house at the end of the street. It was an old construction with peeling walls and a broken wooden fence. They knocked on the door and waited. After a short while, a young woman opened it. She must have been his granddaughter, about 18 or 20 years old, and she looked at them with the same suspicion as everyone else in the village. When they explained why they were there, she hesitated for a few seconds but finally let them in. The house was humble, with old furniture and a damp smell that permeated the air. In a bed by the window, lying under a thick blanket, was Robert, a man as thin as a stick, his face weathered by the sun and years. Liam approached slowly. "Mr. Miller, my name is Liam O'Connell. I've come to ask you about the Cedars homestead, about what happened 40 years ago." Robert opened his eyes with difficulty. He looked at them with a mixture of curiosity and resignation. "O'Connell," he murmured. "That name carries weight, young man." Liam knelt by his bed. "My mom, Clara, remembers it." The old man let out a long sigh. "Of course I remember her. She was a good woman, always smiling, always attentive to everything." Liam swallowed hard. "What happened that day?" "The day of the accident." Robert looked at the ceiling as if searching for words in the damp stains. "I saw everything," he finally said in a gruff voice. "I saw when your aunt arrived. That woman, Ruth, arrived nervous with a half-destroyed car. Your mom was inside, alive but confused, as if she was gone. She was asking for her son, asking for you." Liam clenched his fists, suppressing his rage. "And my dad?" The old man closed his eyes. "He was already dead. I saw him. Ruth didn't want to wait for anyone. She ordered me not to say anything, that if I spoke, I would get into a lot of trouble. Then she took your mom just like that, without papers, without telling anyone." Liam felt his stomach churn. "Are you willing to testify?" he asked, knowing it was a lot to ask. Robert gave a sad smile. "Young man, I don't know how much time I have left, but if I can help bring justice, I will. Not for you, but for her, for your mom." Liam squeezed his hand gratefully. He knew that testimony could change everything. When they left the house, the sky was already dark. Only crickets could be heard, and the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel. Mark lit a cigarette and slowly exhaled the smoke. "We have Mrs. Clara. We have the documents, and now we have a key witness." Liam looked up at the starry sky. "Now, Ruth, your lies are over." The following days were pure strategy. Ryan prepared the documents for the lawsuit. Mark arranged for the witnesses. Liam made sure to be with his mom as much as he could. It was as if each played their part in a game they already knew had no turning back. Ruth, meanwhile, had disappeared. No one knew where she was. She didn't answer calls, didn't show up at her houses. Not even her usual friends knew where she was. Liam wasn't fooled. He knew it wasn't a coincidence. Ruth was making her moves, looking for a way to save herself, and it wasn't long before she struck. One afternoon, Ryan called Liam urgently. "We have a problem." Liam was at the clinic accompanying Clara when he received the call. He quickly went to the hallway to hear better. "What happened?" "Ruth filed a countersuit. She says all the money and properties are legitimately hers, and accuses Clara of having been mentally incapacitated since before the accident." Liam gripped the phone so hard he almost broke it. "How is she going to prove that?" "It's a lie." Ryan sighed. "I don't know yet, but if she manages to convince the judge that your mother was incapable of managing her assets before the accident, it could complicate everything for us." Liam felt the world spin. Ruth was more devious than he had imagined. She was willing to sink Clara, to destroy her even further, just to avoid losing her fortune. He hung up and re-entered the room where his mother was. Clara slept peacefully, oblivious to the storm brewing outside. Liam approached her and tenderly stroked her gray hair. "I won't fail you, Mom," he murmured. That same night, he convened Ryan and Mark at his apartment. They needed to rethink everything. Sitting in the living room, they reviewed the documents, the testimonies, the recordings. "Ruth will try to use everything against us," Ryan said. "She'll pay off witnesses, buy fake doctors, tarnish your mom's image however she can." Mark lit a cigarette and exhaled the smoke with annoyance. "That old woman is more poisonous than a scorpion." Liam ran a hand through his hair. "What can we do?" Ryan thought for a few seconds. "The key is to prove that Clara was mentally competent after the accident. Even if she had memory loss, that didn't make her legally incapacitated." Mark sat up. "And we have the medical report from the homestead, the one that recommended psychological treatment, not confinement." Liam nodded. "And Robert, he can say my mom spoke, asked for me." Ryan grimaced. "It's a risk. Ruth's lawyer will try to discredit the testimony of an old, sick man." Liam slammed his fist on the table. "I don't care. We'll fight to the end." Ryan looked at him seriously. "All right then, prepare yourself because Ruth won't stop. And the worst," he paused, "the worst is that she might have an ace up her sleeve." Liam frowned. "What do you mean? Ruth isn't foolish. If she sees she's going to lose everything, she might try one last low blow." Mark stepped forward. "Like blackmail? Extortion?" Ryan shook his head. "Something worse. She might reveal secrets even you don't know. Something that could destroy your credibility." Liam looked at both of them, feeling an alarm go off in his chest. "What secrets?" Ryan sighed. "I don't know, but be prepared for anything." And it didn't take them long to find out. 2 days later, while Liam was at the clinic, he received an unexpected visit. It was Ruth. She walked in as if nothing was wrong, impeccable, elegant, smelling of expensive perfume. Liam saw her enter and felt his blood run cold. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. Ruth smiled. That fake smile that no longer fooled anyone. "I came to talk to you alone." Liam looked at the nurses who were watching out of the corner of their eyes. He nodded and led Ruth to an empty room. He closed the door and confronted her. "What do you want?" Ruth stared at him intently with that viperous gaze he knew so well. "I know you're going to file the lawsuit. I know you have witnesses and papers." Liam crossed his arms firmly. "And I'm not stopping." Ruth approached, lowering her voice. "Then listen carefully, Liam, because if you go ahead, I'm going to tell the world something you don't know." Liam didn't answer. He just watched her, waiting for the blow. Ruth smiled like someone enjoying crushing an insect. "You are not James O'Connell's son." Liam felt the ground open beneath his feet. "What are you saying?" Ruth moved even closer, until he could almost feel her breath. "Your real father is another person, someone much more powerful, someone you would never want to know you exist." Liam pushed her away, furious. "Liar." Ruth chuckled softly, as if enjoying seeing him break. "Are you sure you want to keep digging up the past? Are you sure you want to open that door?" Liam looked at her with hatred, more certain than ever. Ruth looked at him with contempt. "Then prepare to lose everything." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving him alone, trembling with rage and confusion. Liam clenched his fists until his knuckles hurt. Ruth had played her last card, and now everything was even more personal. News of the trial spread like wildfire. It wasn't just any case. Not every day did a famous millionaire take his own aunt to court for fraud, breach of trust, and falsification of documents. The media began to pry, wanting to know more. Some journalists hovered around the clinic where Clara was. Others waited outside Ryan's building. Liam didn't care. He wasn't there to protect his image. He was there to seek justice. The day of the trial dawned gray, as if the sky knew that what was about to happen was no ordinary event. Liam arrived early at the courthouse, dressed in a dark suit, no tie. His gaze was firm, though inside, a hurricane raged in his chest. Mark and Ryan waited for him at the entrance. The three walked through the lobby together, ignoring the cameras and microphones that pursued them. On the other side, as expected, arrived Ruth. She looked impeccable as always. A designer dress, perfect hairstyle, defiant gaze. She was accompanied by her lawyer, Edward Davies, that shark they had already investigated. He smiled as if it were a simple formality. They entered the courtroom. The judge, a serious-faced man of few words, asked everyone to sit, explained the basic rules, and warned that he would tolerate no interruptions or daytime drama. Liam felt his heart pounding in his ears. The prosecutor spoke first, presenting the case clearly. Ruth O'Connell had falsified Clara's death certificate. She had illegally transferred the O'Connell family properties and accounts into her name. She had admitted Clara to a low-quality nursing home without medical or legal authorization. They presented the original documents, showed James O'Connell's will, where everything was left to his wife and son. They presented the medical report from the Cedars homestead, which clearly recommended psychological treatment, not institutionalization. Then the witnesses were called to the stand. First, the retired hospital nurse, who confirmed that Clara was not incapacitated at the time she was handed over to Ruth. Then the former nursing home worker, who recalled how a wealthy woman had left a confused lady and paid in advance never to reappear. And finally, the most important witness, Robert. The old foreman, frail but determined, testified before the judge everything he had seen on the day of the accident. How Clara had survived, how Ruth had secretly taken her from the hospital, how she had ordered him to keep silent. The courtroom was in complete silence as Robert spoke. Every word of his was like a stone thrown directly at Ruth's castle of lies. When it was the defense's turn, Edward Davies tried everything. He tried to discredit Robert, alleging that his memory was no longer reliable. The judge did not allow it. He tried to present false medical documents claiming that Clara suffered from dementia before the accident. Ryan quickly rose to object. The judge sustained the objection. He did not allow garbage to be introduced into the record. Edward looked at Ruth as if asking for another ace up her sleeve, but she only crossed her arms, her face hardened. Liam felt it difficult to breathe. He wanted it all to end, but at the same time, he wanted to be sure that no doubt remained. When the judge asked for final arguments, Ryan spoke for him. In a firm voice, without dramatizing, he said, "Today we are not just talking about stolen assets. Today, we are talking about a stolen life. A mother who was taken from her son, a family destroyed by ambition. Justice is not just returning what was stolen. Justice is acknowledging the harm that should never have been done." Liam looked down, feeling a lump in his throat. Ruth blinked. The judge retired to deliberate. The minutes stretched into eternity. Liam paced back and forth in the waiting room while Mark tried to distract him with nonsense, and Ryan checked messages on his phone. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they were called back into the courtroom. The judge sat down, reviewed some papers, and spoke. His voice was firm, leaving no room for doubt. This court finds sufficient evidence to consider that Miss Ruth O'Connell committed fraud, falsification of documents, and breach of trust. The immediate restitution of assets to Mr. Liam O'Connell and his mother, Clara O'Connell, is ordered. Liam closed his eyes for a second. They had succeeded, but the judge didn't stop there. Furthermore, a criminal investigation is ordered against Miss O'Connell for the aforementioned crimes. The prosecution shall proceed according to law. Ruth's face was a picture. All color drained from it, and her full smile vanished as if by magic. Liam looked at her one last time. He said nothing. It wasn't necessary. He had won, but deep down, he knew the most difficult battle was just beginning. Rebuilding what Ruth had destroyed in his and his mother's lives. He left the courtroom and looked up at the sky. It was a new beginning. When they left the courthouse, the atmosphere was like a contained celebration. Ryan and Mark barely smiled, knowing the blow had been strong and precise. Liam walked beside them, feeling for the first time in a long time that something inside him was settling, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But it didn't take them long to realize that the matter wasn't over. Liam was barely getting into his SUV when he received a call. It was an unknown number, he answered, without thinking. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was cold, dry. "Liam O'Connell? Who is this?" "Someone who has information you need to know." Liam tightened his grip on the phone. "I'm not playing games. It's not a game. It's about your father, your true father." Liam froze. The voice continued. Ruth didn't completely lie. "James O'Connell is not your biological father, and the true one could change your life more than you imagine." Before he could ask more, the call disconnected. Liam stared at the phone for a few seconds, as if waiting for it to ring again. Mark, watching him from the passenger door, immediately noticed that something was wrong. "What's going on?" Liam took a deep breath. "Someone says they have information about my real father." Mark frowned. "Do you think it's true?" Liam put his phone in his pocket. "I don't know what to believe anymore, but I have to find out." That night in his apartment, Liam couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk by the window overlooking the lit-up city and thought about everything he had experienced in recent months. He thought about Clara, his life, his childhood, And now about that bombshell Ruth had dropped as a last resort. What if it was true? What if his life was built on an even bigger lie? At dawn, he decided not to stay still. He spoke with Ryan. He asked him to discreetly investigate everything he could about his mother before the accident. Friends, documents, anything that might give a clue about what Ruth had insinuated. 2 days of tension passed until Ryan arrived at his apartment with an envelope in his hand. Liam opened it without a word. Inside were copies of birth certificates, photographs, letters, and a story. Before marrying James O'Connell, Clara had had a relationship with another man, a powerful, influential man, from a family that ran dirty businesses, politics, money at levels Liam could barely imagine. The name chilled him. Gordon Sinclair, one of the country's most powerful magnates, owner of media chains, construction companies, minds a man with more power than Liam could comprehend. According to the documents, Gordon and Clara had had a serious relationship, but it ended badly due to family pressures. Shortly after, Clara met James, who accepted her, pregnant, and raised Liam as his own. Liam was Gordon Sinclair's biological son. He didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run away. Ryan watched him in silence, awaiting his reaction. "What does this mean?" Liam finally asked. "That your true father doesn't even know you exist," Ryan said. "Or if he does, he has kept it a secret all these years." Liam rested his forehead in his hands. Everything he thought he knew about his origin crumbled like sand between his fingers. "Ruth knew?" he asked suddenly. Ryan nodded. "Everything indicates she did. It's likely that information was her ace in the hole all this time. That's why she dared to do everything she did. She knew that if things got complicated, she could threaten you with this truth." Liam let out a bitter laugh. Even in her downfall, she wanted to poison everything. He sat in silence for a long time, looking at the city through the window. His life had changed forever. Not only because of Ruth's betrayal, not only because of the fight for his mother, but because now he knew that part of his blood came from someone who never cared for him, someone who might not even recognize him if he looked him in the eyes. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. He didn't know if he wanted to meet Gordon Sinclair. He didn't know if he wanted to open that door. The only thing he knew for sure was that at the end of the day, his true family was Clara. She, though broken, though forgotten, never stopped loving him. And that was the only thing that truly mattered. The days after the trial were a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Liam felt he had run a marathon and was only just beginning to catch his breath. All the media noise gradually subsided. Newspapers, social media, news channels, everyone lost interest when they realized there was no luxury scandal or embarrassing fights, just a man fighting for his mother. Liam didn't want to give interviews, didn't want to appear on covers, didn't want fame as a hero. He just wanted his life back. The first big step was to get Clara out of the clinic. Not because she wasn't being well cared for, but because she had asked for it. Not with clear words, but with glances, with small gestures. She wanted a home, a real home. Liam found a beautiful house on the outskirts of the city, a quiet place, surrounded by trees, and with a large garden where Clara could spend afternoons in the sun. He bought it without a second thought. He filled it with comfortable furniture, photos from his childhood, soft music, scents his mother might recognize. The moving day was like a small triumph. Clara didn't understand everything, but her shy smile upon seeing the garden, the armchairs, the flowers was enough for Liam. He felt that every sleepless night, every fight, every tear was worth it. They settled in, without haste. He hired a team of specialized nurses to care for her, but he remained her primary companion. He sat with her in the mornings, read the newspaper to her, even though she couldn't always follow the news. He talked to her about his day, his plans, his childhood memories, even though sometimes it seemed like he was talking to himself. And sometimes, just sometimes, Clara would answer him with a stray word, a smile, a caress on his hand. These were small moments, but for Liam, they were everything. The subject of Gordon Sinclair hung in the air. Ryan had found a way to approach him discreetly, but Liam wasn't ready. Not yet. He knew that one day he would want to know more, to know who this man was who had given him life, even if he never gave him a hug, advice, or even his name. But for now, his priority was elsewhere. One weekend, while they were in the garden, Clara looked at him for a long time. Liam was helping her water some plants when he felt her gaze. He approached. "What's wrong, Mom?" She took a while to respond, as if the words had to travel from very far to reach her mouth. "Happy?" she asked in a whisper. Liam knelt in front of her. "Yes, Mom, very happy." Clara smiled. It wasn't just any smile. It was the most sincere smile Liam had ever seen in his life. They hugged right there, under the sun, among the flowers and the smell of wet earth. That moment was worth more than all the millions that had been stolen from him, more than any famous surname, more than any lost inheritance. That was his true victory. Time passed. Clara had ups and downs, as expected. Some days, she remembered more. Other days, she got lost in her world again. But she was never alone, never abandoned again. Liam reorganized his life too. He delegated more work in his company, put aside useless social events, empty parties. He began to build something new, something that truly made sense. He reconnected with old friends, supported social causes related to the abandonment of the elderly, visited other nursing homes where he donated without taking photos or posting it online. And, above all, he built new memories with his mom. Small things, a movie afternoon, a walk in the garden, an improvised breakfast with burnt pancakes. All of that was pure gold to him. One day, as they walked through the garden, Clara squeezed his hand. Liam looked at her. Now she smiled and said, "My boy." Liam smiled too, feeling that everything, absolutely everything was worth it. The inheritance, the fights, the painful truths, the secrets, all of that was behind him. Now, only one thing mattered: the present. A present where, despite everything, he had achieved what many never do, recovering his true family, and with it, his true place in the world.